Yeah, every month the meeting's recorded and it's online, so if you missed it, you can come back and watch it. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm Paul Smith, the Executive Director of the Utah Apartment Association. And tonight our general membership meeting will focus on the UAA forms and notices to help you understand the resources that are available and how to correctly use them. Before I start, though, I want to make a couple of announcements. We have a great designation program for property managers called our UPRO, our Utah Professional Rental Operator Program. We have two options. We have a day class. Those are the third Friday of every month from 8:30 to 12:30. And we also have an evening class. Those are the second Thursday from 6 to 10. And the UPRO class is 8 modules. They have things like maintenance or legal or insurance or investing. And they're really good. It's all continuing education for real estate professionals. So if you're interested in this, there's brochures on the back table. It's very popular. It just keeps getting more and more popular. And people really enjoy the training. We have great instructors. Kurt Colmore Jr. does a couple of classes. We have an insurance expert that does a class. We have an investment broker that's brokered over $1 billion in investment property sales in his career that talks about how to value and evaluate investment property. So really good education. The next thing that's also great education is we have a legal cruise. This is going to be the week after Thanksgiving, the 29th of November, and it's going to be a blast. The group that went last year just had a ball, but even more importantly, they got 12 hours of training from Kurt Colmore, the premier eviction attorney and landlord attorney in Utah. And the people that came just told me, they said, Paul, I couldn't get this much quality time with Kurt Colmore anytime, and this was just wonderful to do it on a cruise ship where we could enjoy ourselves as well as have the education. So you got to look into this. This is a really great idea. Also, we have our trade show this month, our education conference and trade show. Last year we had almost 13,000 people attend. This year our keynote speaker on April 29th at the Southtown Expo Center, our speakers are Connor and David O'Leary, who are locals. They're apartment investors. They own big apartment complexes. And they actually won the Amazing Race. You may have seen that on TV. Their story is just phenomenal. They're both cancer survivors. In the first season of the Amazing Race that they were on, they were way ahead. And Dave, who's the father, pulled an Achilles tendon that snapped on him as he was running across the beach. And the doctor said, well, you can stay in the race, but if you do, you are never going to be able to walk right again. Within 3 days, you need to drop out of the race and get surgery. And dropping out of the race meant forfeiting their $1 million prize that they were this far away from. And so an agonizing choice had to be made. But the good news is they were invited back to a season of All-Stars and were fan favorites. And they'll tell you their story and about how what they learned from the Amazing Race that they apply to their business and life and things like that. So I hope you can come join us for that. That is a great thing. So, tonight we're going to talk about forms. And so if you want to pull out the green forms packet, or if you're online and you want to just scroll through, I'll tell you the title and page number of each form. But the first form I want to talk to you about is the landlord's best friend on page 1. This is the 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. How many of you have ever served one of these before? All of us, basically, right? This is the form we serve when tenants do what? Or don't do what? When they don't pay, exactly. So it is a violation of the contract, but it's a specific notice for failure to pay. And this notice says a couple things. It says, within 3 days after service of this notice, you are hereby required to do one of the following. And they will say, and listen to the options, pay the following. Okay? Option 2, vacate within 3 days. Then it says, in the event that you don't vacate, or you don't pay, you will be an unlawful detainer in violation of Utah code. And what does Utah law give landlords when tenants violate the unlawful detainer law? Treble damages. So if it's $1,000 rent, if they stay past the 4th day, then they are penalized treble damages until you can get them out, which is typically 3 to 4 weeks, depending on your eviction. So let's talk about a couple of things. Whose names do you put on this form? Everybody that you know, okay? Even if there's 2 tenants, Jack and Jill, and they've moved Jimmy and John in there, you should put everybody's name on there. Why the more names, the better?
Because whoever answers the door.
More people to go after and get judgments against. I know someone whose roommate was a bum, so he moved out. The landlord evicted him. Did the landlord collect any money from the bum? No, but the name of the other tenant was on that lease and on that notice, and they got a $6,000 judgment and garnished that wages and got all of that back. So the reason we do this is to be thorough and put everybody in jeopardy, because if you sign a lease or if you're there, you're jointly and severally liable for the damages that you cause. Okay? How do we calculate rent? So I want you to look at the place that we put rent. If you notice, there's one line for rent for the period through, and in this month we would say through the period of March 31st, and let's say that's $1,000. The next line's for a late fee. What is typically too high of a late fee for $1,000 rent? Anything over 10%. So we could have a $100 late fee, and the court would probably accept that. And then you might also have a service of notice fee. Who in this room charges a service of notice fee, and how much? 25, 35. It just depends on how inconvenient it is for you to go over there and serve that notice. So you add that all up, it says you must pay $11.35 within 3 days. How do we count the 3 days? Let's say we serve it on the Friday before a holiday on the following Monday. What days do we count?
Calendar depends on how your lease.
The law actually says calendar days. Okay, so when we fixed the law 6 years ago, we put in the statute calendar days, but we never count the day we serve. So you count Friday, but you count Saturday, Sunday, the holiday. And then if they're not out by Monday night at midnight, Tuesday morning you can start that eviction. Okay, if somebody offers you the whole $11.35, but you're mad at them and you don't want them to stay, do you have to accept it?
Yes.
Yes, because it's one of the options that you gave. If they offer you $1,000, do you have to accept it? No, it's not the full amount. You don't have to accept it. Now, how many of us would accept $1,000? Sure, we're pragmatists. $1,000 buys you 3 more days, right? So you give me $1,000, I serve you another 3-day notice for the $135, and we need to clarify what that $135 is. What is that that's still due?
Rent.
It's not late fees, it's rent, because we say in our contract that all money applies first to what? Non-rent items like late fees, service of notice fees, damages, utilities, etc. Okay, and so they paid really $135 the fees, $865 the rent. So their balance is $135 rent. So we can immediately serve them that notice. Any questions? Okay. What if somebody brings us the full amount on the 5th or the 6th day? Do we have to work with them?
No.
No. Past the 4 days, they are now an unlawful detainer. You don't have to work with them even if they offer you the full amount. You can, but you don't have to. All right, turn to the next page. This is the notice called the 3-day notice to vacate nuisance. Now, nuisance is kind of a word that is kind of broad, but under state statute, nuisance evictions are very narrow. There's just 3 types of nuisances. One is a criminal act. So somebody commits a criminal act and there's a police report or there's an arrest or a charge, you serve this notice. The second is a threat to the health and safety of others. If somebody is starting fires in the house, or they're threatening to kill the landlord or the neighbors or something like that, we don't have to give them a second chance. We can say that's unacceptable, nuisance, get out. The third is failure to respond after multiple attempts. Many times when I'm teaching, I say, give me an example of a nuisance, and somebody will say, a loud party. That's not what the law considered a nuisance. I know you consider that a nuisance, but what notice would we serve in that case? We would serve the 3-day comply, which is the next notice that we'll talk about. It gives them 3 days to fix it, because it's not that serious. But the 3 things we just talked about, criminal act, threat to the health and safety of others, or failure to respond after 3 previous notices. For instance, here's a common one. They get a Rottweiler. You serve a notice, get rid of that Rottweiler. They do for 2 weeks. It comes back, you serve another notice. After you've done that a few times, you don't have to ask nicely again. You can just insist they leave. Yes, Wanda?
I've got a guy that was repairing cars in the garage with the door down.
Yes.
I saw all these strange cars all the time. So I asked him to, he wasn't home.
Okay.
I asked her to inspect the garage. She let me in. He had a car in there all torn apart.
Okay.
So I gave him a 3-day notice to the form,
Yes.
get rid of it.
Uh-huh.
Well, now he's hiding it.
Okay.
He won't let anybody in, and I know he's doing it.
Yeah. So her question is, she has a situation where there's a gentleman who has a car that's disassembled in the garage, and she served a notice that violates the contract. So she's asking what the next step is. Well, generally, in somebody's garage, the lease doesn't limit what they can do. They certainly could not have a under construction vehicle. If you had specific language in your lease that does it, then you can certainly insist that he does it. And to verify that he's removed it, she could do what?
24 hours.
An inspection. Give a 24-hour notice and you can go in. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Then what? And I find it again, what do I do?
You'd serve another nuisance, you'd serve another comply or vacate nuisance or notice until there's 3 of those, and then you could do a nuisance. Yes?
You probably should explain how you serve it also, because I find this very good.
We will. Thank you very much. He's asking, explain how you serve notices. When I wrap up the 3rd notice, I'll talk about how to serve them and how to fill out the service of notice. So this notice, nuisance notice, is different than the other 2 because it doesn't give them a chance to what? Fix it. If you pay or vacate, you have a chance. If you comply or vacate, you have a chance. But the nuisance notice just says, hey, well, you've done serious enough, just vacate. No second chances. Okay? That's why it has to be a higher standard to serve one of these notices. Now, turn to page 3. This is the comply or vacate. We also call it the 3-day notice to perform the covenants of the lease. We again put the tenant's name, and then let's read. It says, within 3 days after service of this notice, you are hereby required to comply with your lease agreement by, and give me some examples of things that you put in there. Get rid of the vehicle that's not supposed to be in the garage. Get rid of the dog that's not supposed to be there. Get rid of the unauthorized occupants, the Rocco, your buddy that you moved in there. He needs to either fill out an application and apply and be added to the lease, or he needs to move. So things like that. So each of these 3-day notices needs to be served under Utah law in one of 4 ways. What are the 2 best ways to serve them?
Personally.
Personally is always the best. We knock on the door and we explain, listen, Paul, nothing personal. I want to continue our relationship as a customer, but you've got to comply with our contract, or you've got to pay our rent. Okay? So that's the best conversation, and explain to them what will happen if they don't. If you don't move or pay within 3 days, I'm going to go to court and get treble damages and have a judgment, and my attorney will stalk you to the end of his days and collect that from you, garnish your wages, and so on and so forth, and it'll be miserable. So just solve this now. So that's great. But what if they're not there? What else could you do? You could post it on the door, couldn't you? Okay? And what I would recommend is you tape all 4 corners and you do it face out on the main door. Don't sneak around back and put it on the back door. Put it on the main entrance. Okay? There's 2 other ways that we could do it, the law says, but most of us wouldn't. Why would you never serve it by certified mail? They're not going to sign for it. So it's not, unless they pick it up, it's not served. The other is that we can find someone that's of suitable age and discretion, but that's not the tenant, like the grandma, like the babysitter. We could serve that person and mail a second copy. But I've always thought it would be better to just say, nice to meet you, Grandma. Would you shut the door? And now you can post the door. Okay? And then you don't have to go mail a second copy. All right, any questions about how we serve notices? Okay, let's talk about how we fill out notices. There's 3 places where you need to sign. Okay, the top place is what we call the send notices and communications to. And you say landlord or manager, and this is my name, address, phone number, whatever. And then you sign it there that you are serious about this notice. Second is, after you've served it, your copy in your car, you fill out how you served it. You say on the 25th of, or the 26th of March, I did serve it personally, and then you just sign it there that you served it personally. And then, in the old days, we had to notarize these forms, but the courts have realized that's kind of silly. So instead of notarizing it, we sign it a 3rd time, meaning that we really, or swearing that we really meant it the first 2 times that we signed it. Okay? So that's what we call the self-authentication. Okay, turn to the next page. This is page 4. This is a landlord's notice of uninhabitable premises. A landlord's notice of uninhabitable premises is something we serve if there's an act of God or there's something that we cannot fix within 3 days. Okay? I know a woman whose sewer line broke. It was $15,000 to repair. She didn't have the money. She said, sorry, tenants, you're going to have to move. This notice gives them 10 days, says they get their full deposit back, and they get any money, prepaid rent, up to the date of the breach back. Okay? Hopefully you'll never have to serve this, but if we have a big earthquake, if we have a hurricane, if we have a tornado, you may not be able to get your place up and going in 3 days, and you may have to have the tenant move out while you commence repairs. Yes?
So you have to give the full rent back? Okay, let's say a portion of the apartment was damaged.
Yeah.
The bathroom is where we struggled with, in the bedroom.
Yes.
But the living room was fine, and they chose not to clean any of that.
Yes.
So I actually took that out of their deposit when we...
So what she's asking is they had money due back, but she had damages. Can she deduct for damages? And the answer is likely you can deduct for your damages. Yes, so thanks for clarifying. Okay. All right, page 5. In Utah, we have what's called the Fit Premises Act. And tenants have notices that they can serve us if they feel we are violating the Fit Premises Act. The first notice is called a 24-hour dangerous condition notice. This is if there's something so dangerous like arcing electrical wire or perhaps raw sewage bubbling up. The landlord's required to do what in 24 hours? Commence action. We can't possibly, in every case, fix things within 24 hours, but we can, in most cases, commence it if it's very, very dangerous. Okay? So that's the page 5 notice. The next notice is called the 3-day habitability notice. Now remember, under the Fit Premises Act, there's about 5 things that are called habitability standards. They are, you've got to have running water and operational plumbing. You've got to have electrical connected. We're not telling you what kind, but whatever's there has to work. Third, you have to have heat and hot water available. Fourth, doors and windows must secure. Okay? The place must be able to be secured. Fifth, air conditioning, if you have it, must work. So those are the 5 habitability things, and if one of those breaks, a tenant might serve you this notice, and it says, hey, Paul, within 3 days, or landlord, within 3 days, you need to fix my furnace. If you don't, there's a couple of options that they can fill out. They can check this first box that says, if you don't, I'm going to move out, cancel my lease. You'll owe me back the money that's prepaid and due, and I'm off the hook. So if it's a year lease, and you don't fix it within the 3 days, and they've given you proper notice and served it in the proper ways, and you don't fix it, they can move out. I don't think that happens very often, does it? Why? Landlords are generally responsive. In fact, most landlords will never see one of these notices. Why? Because you respond when they call or they email or text, and so you never get one of these. But if your niece or nephew has a slum landlord, you'll know what notice to give them. And people say, where do tenants get these? They're on our website. The Legal Services has them. The tenants groups have them. We really are advocates of having fair laws that give landlords quick remedies and tenants quick remedies if the other party is violating their rights. Okay? All right, turn to the next page. This is a 10-day deficient condition notice. Now, let me ask you this. If my fridge breaks, is that a habitability issue? No, because it's not one of those 5 things. The 5 things were water and sewer, electrical, heat and hot water, premises secure, and air conditioning. But if the roof leaks, do I have to fix it? If the garage door breaks, do I have to fix it? Yes. Why? What agreement do we have that says we will maintain the premises in the same condition that you rented them in, our rental agreement? So we are obligated by contract to do those things, and because they're not as serious as heat out or air conditioning out, law gives us 10 days to fix them. I'm not recommending that the fridge goes out, you wait 10 days. You're in the customer service business. You fix it as quick as you possibly can. But if you've got 3 furnaces out and somebody's got a garage door broken, you might say, what? I got to prioritize and do the 3 furnaces first, and I'll get to the garage door as soon as I can, but you have up to 10 days to do that. Okay, any questions on that notice? So the second thing that we talked about, the first remedy they can put is, they can put that they will move out and cancel the lease if you don't fix it. The other thing that they can put is repair and deduct. What does repair and deduct mean?
They get it.
Hey landlord, if you don't fix it within 3 days, don't worry about it. I'll fix it myself.
They have to give you one of these notices first, because they can't just go off.
They absolutely have to give you one of these notices first, and they must be completely what? current on rent. This isn't for somebody who's behind that's trying to make an excuse for why they're not paying. Oh, I'm not paying because the sink's broken. No. They pay you, then they serve you the notice, say sink's broken or faucet's broken, and if you don't fix it within 3 days, landlord, I'm going to go replace the faucet, have it installed, and then I'll deduct it from what month's rent? Next month's rent. In fact, they can only go up to an amount no greater than 2 months' rent. Okay, so it can't be a huge thing, but it could be a furnace if that's reasonable or something like that. If it's less than 2 months' rent. Okay, any questions on that form? Okay, that was page 7. Now we're on page 8. This is the application to rent. So the application to rent is for us to collect enough information that we can make an intelligent decision about whether we're going to take a risk on a renter or not. We get name, address, social security number, birth date, because we use those to verify what? Credit and criminal. Okay? And we also get job history, landlord history, because we use that to verify what? Yeah, if they were good tenants, if they meet their obligations, if they pay their bills. And we also have them sign a couple things at the bottom. So let's read this. We say, has anyone who will reside in the premises been arrested, convicted, accused of a crime against person or property, or drug or alcohol-related crimes? Why do we ask that question? What is the only thing that shows up on a criminal background check? Convictions. So are there people who were arrested or charged and weren't convicted? We need to know about that. And for instance, let's say it's the minor children. We have a 16-year-old kid who's got a criminal history. We're not going to find that in a background check, are we? Because he's a minor. So we ask the parents, is anyone in the house have run-ins with the law? And they say, yeah, my 16-year-old's got me. They have to disclose that to you. Remember, if people lie on an application, that's called fraud in the inducement, and it's grounds for eviction. Okay? Next question we ask is, has anyone filed a petition in bankruptcy? Why is bankruptcy relevant?
It's out of their debt.
Sometimes people that have done bankruptcies know the tools to get out of the debt or to make life difficult on you. Sometimes if people are in the process of doing a bankruptcy, they can include you in that bankruptcy. So yes, bankruptcy is relevant. The next question we asked is, are they on parole or probation? Why do we ask that? They paid their debt to society, people say. Why are we hassling them? Well, the reality is they may have paid their debt to society in the prison, but 2/3 of the time people on parole or probation do what? Go back to jail for a violation of some kind. And if they're back in jail, that means they can't pay their rent. So it's quite risky to rent to people on parole or probation. So we need to know so they can say, listen, here's my story, this is why I'm going to be good. And you might say something like, well, okay, I want double deposit or I want a co-signer. I might work with you still if it's a minor offense. But if it's serious, we might say, yeah, I'm not going to work with you because that offense would scare the other neighbors. It would get, if it's a sex offense, it's public information and the neighbors can freak out that there's a sex offender in their neighborhood, and so on and so forth. The 4 riskiest types of crimes, by the way, are sex crimes, drug crimes, violent crimes, and property crimes, meaning like arson or taggers. I don't think we should rent to arsonists, okay? The person who's done one of those in the last 4 years is something like 75% likely to do it again. So that's why it's so risky. Okay? Again, are we a second chance society? Sure. Okay? There are consequences to actions, though, and if you had something serious enough, it might make getting a house harder. Okay? It might make getting a mortgage harder. It just, that's how life is, and you shouldn't feel guilty about that. There was a hand that went up. Did I miss it?
Well,
Yes.
it happened to us one time that we didn't do that. Somebody in one of the apartments was on parole, and they showed up to find him, and evidently somebody had the address wrong, and they kicked in the wrong door looking for them. So I ended up having to replace a door in another apartment.
That's terrible. He had a parolee, and they came looking for him and kicked in the wrong door, and so he had to deal with that damage. That's frustrating. Okay.
Yeah, that door was shot. They used one of those battering.
Police don't mess around when they break down doors, do they?
Nope.
Yeah, they don't mess around.
It right apart.
Can't you get them to pay for it if it's the wrong address?
Can you get the government to pay for damages to you? Remember, government has immunity in most cases.
Yeah.
And so if the police were trying their best, no, you can't get, they made a little mistake. They threw a flashbang in the wrong window and it burned up the carpet in the wrong apartment. Happens, okay? That's why you have insurance and whatever. So,
You're not getting
act of God, exactly.
Yeah, but really, insurance, I think, is a big deal. If you can afford better insurance.
Boy, insurance, we have seminars on insurance throughout the year. If you aren't an insurance expert, I'm not asking you to become one, but at least understand how you could slip through the cracks. Come hear horror stories of people who thought they had enough insurance and they learned the hard way. And so you can learn the easy way. And usually it's just pennies. It's not very much more expensive to get the better coverage. You just need to be educated enough to understand what it is. Okay? Have you ever been evicted? Is that relevant?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, best indicator of future performance is past performance. Do they smoke? Is that relevant?
Yes.
Do they have pets? Is that relevant? Yes, so we want this information up front. And then we have them sign at the bottom that says, I attest that the above is true and correct, and I attest that everyone who resides in the apartment is legal to reside in the United States. Why do we do that? Because in the state of Utah, it's illegal to knowingly rent to an illegal. So we also have fair housing things. We can't profile people. We can't say, that guy looks Canadian. Let's profile him. No, you can't do that. You have to say, are you legal? Do you promise that everyone who lives here is legal? And if they say they are, then if it later turns out to be untrue, we can evict them for fraud in the inducement. Okay? Yeah, Jeremy.
Judges grant evictions on the fraud and the inducement?
Always. He asks, how likely would it be for a judge to evict on fraud in the inducement? And they take it very seriously. Fraud in the inducement of a contract is very, very serious. And we're not just talking about rental contracts. Any contract, if you lie and you misrepresent, a judge will throw the book at you. Okay, turn to the next page. This is page 9. We're going to talk about our residential rental agreement. Now, if you'll notice at the top of the residential rental agreement, there's two lines. One for people over the age of 18, one for people under the age of 18. Okay? Why do we have a separate line? Only those over the 18 have the capacity to sign contracts. And so we don't have the people under the age of 18 sign contracts, but we identify them so that we can't just do musical 16-year-old gangbanger kids. Okay? You can have Sally and Fred and Sam, and we know about those guys. And then if they grow up and move out, they can't just move somebody else in, a cousin or something like that. Okay? We need to identify everybody who's an authorized occupant and list them on here. If you'll notice, under premises, if you go a couple lines down, it says, occupancy by guests remaining over 3 consecutive days or more than 5 nights in a calendar quarter are unauthorized occupants and a violation of this contract. So people ask us all the time, how long does someone stay before they violate the contract? Well, in this case, it's 3 consecutive nights or more than 5 overnights in a calendar quarter, unless they receive permission. If they say, my mom's coming in to help me with the new baby, fine. If they say, I got a brother that's visiting in the military for a month, fine. But they need to let us know. So, we probably aren't going to put that brother that's going to be there a month on the lease, but we need to be aware of what's going on, okay? Okay, under rent and fees, it's kind of fun to go through this exercise. Let's say our monthly rent is $1,000. What is a proration? They move in halfway through the month. We might do what? We prorate the rent, and there's 2 methods, isn't there? The first method, if you're not really concerned, if they have really good credit, if they're high-end tenants, you might say, the first month just pay half your rent. Next month we'll start paying your full month's rent. But if they're low income and they're having a hard time coming up with rent, you also might say, listen, what we do is we have you pay the whole first month's rent and we prorate the second month's rent, because many people that are low income that couldn't come up with a full month's rent when they move in probably can never come up with a full month's rent on the first or the following first or whenever. So be very careful that you're financially screening your tenants, that you make sure they can afford the apartment, and you're not just accepting promises and commitments for money. You got to have some cash in hand most of the time to rent a place. Okay, month-to-month fee, what's that?
Chapter 30-day notice.
So a month-to-month fee is a gimmick, let's be honest. It's designed to do 2 things. If my lease expires next August, I might not want them to stay month to month, because if they stay September, October, and move at the end of November, I might be in a really hard time of year. I don't want to work in December. I'm too busy with family and holidays. So you might say, listen, in order to incentivize a renewal or a re-signing, we're going to charge $150, $200, whatever you choose, as a month-to-month fee. And that will hopefully get them to what? Make a decision. Sign or go, because if you go, I can run it pretty easy in August, easy month, but make a decision. Okay? The other reason that we sometimes do it is to compensate ourselves for the risk. Maybe I am willing to take the risk of having people month to month, but maybe they ought to pay a flexibility surcharge. For the flexibility of being able to give me 30 days notice, you're going to pay a $75 or $150 monthly fee. Okay? Many people will accept that. How many of you have collected month-to-month fees? Okay? Yes, there's several people here that have, and it's another revenue source that compensates you for your risk and incentivizes them to sign a new lease. Like, true story, I had a friend that the lease was up, said, Paul, what am I going to do? They want me to sign a new lease. I don't know what I'm going to do. It was a $150 month-to-month fee. She decided to pay that $150 month-to-month fee twice, and then she caved in and re-signed a lease. So these work. Okay? These work.
What if they don't stay the full time? They signed a year's lease,
Yes.
and they're there 6 months, and then they want to go.
Okay, Wanda's question is that they've stayed 6 months of a year's contract, and they want out of the contract. Okay? That is what we call a lease termination situation. And so there's two ways that you can deal with a lease termination in this lease. Number one is you could say, we are going to suggest, I mean, you don't write it in the lease at the beginning, but you say, let's settle this. I'll give you a buyout provision. And the buyout might be 2 months rent or month and a half rent or something like that. You might say, I'm willing to take a risk that I might not be able to rent it for the next 6 months if you'll pay a 2-month buyout fee. And if they do that and you rent it the next day, what can you do? Keep all the money, no problem. If they say no,
You have to have a contract that says that.
you have to sign an agreement with them. And then when they approach you and say, I want to move out, then this is when you negotiate the lease termination fee.
Do you have one of those forms?
You can call the apartment association, we can help you out with that. So you could negotiate a lease termination fee. The other thing you could do is what we call the replacement tenant method. Okay? Oftentimes you might have good tenants and they get transferred to Chicago or whatever happens, and you say, hey, no problem. All you have to do is find a new lease or a new tenant that's willing to sign at least a lease, maybe even longer than the lease that you were in, and I will let you out of the contract. And many of us have had success that way. And what we do is we say, your job to market it. So they put a sign in the yard. They put the ad on KSL.com. And then when they find somebody who meets your rental criteria, and you would give that to them, you'd say, I'm looking for somebody that meets the following criteria. Then they call you and set up an appointment. And if that person meets your criteria and you rent to them, then you sign a release and you say, now that you've found me a replacement tenant, I'm releasing you from the contract. But we don't do that until we have a new contract on the next person. Okay? Question on the replacement tenant.
As a renter, I've done this before. I needed to leave my lease and I found another renter.
Okay?
It's not a big deal.
So he says it's not a big deal. Renters are okay to do it. And you know what I like about it? I had a place once. We lived in a home with a basement apartment. And 3 renters in a row replaced themselves. Okay? They got job transfers and we were happy for them. They were good life advancement opportunities. But we said, you're under a contract, so go rent it yourself. And I didn't have to do what? Any work, any cleaning, anything.
What were the tenants like, though?
They were excellent because I made sure they met my standards. Okay? We're not giving them a blank check to choose anybody. We're saying choose somebody that fits into our box, and we give them a list of what our standard is. And then we run a background check and make a decision that, hey, yeah, this tenant's at least as good as that last one, and so I'm going to approve the termination. Okay. All right. Next thing.
You didn't clean the apartments or paint it or anything between the tenants?
In each of those cases, the tenants left it nicer for their friends that they got to move in than they probably would have for me. So yes, they were just immaculate and did a good job. And I hear that from many landlords as they like this method. It reduces their work, and oftentimes the responsible tenants find really good replacements. Okay? But we control it. We don't just let them put anybody in there. We control the process. All right, next thing is a service of notice fee. That is when we have to do what? When we have to serve a 3-day notice, it's inconvenient, okay? So judges kind of look at the reasonableness of these fees. I've seen them anywhere from $15 to $75. Just, if you had to drive an hour, maybe you could justify $75. If you had to walk to the duplex next door, you probably couldn't justify that much. Maybe it ought to be a little bit more, a little less, okay? The commencement date. Usually we have these leases that commence a certain day and end a certain day. It doesn't always have to be a year later. In fact, sophisticated landlords don't get stuck in convention like 6-month leases, year leases. What do sophisticated landlords, when do we sign the what do we call it, the end date? When is that? A, as far in the future as we can, because sometimes we want a long-term tenant. B, at a time that is convenient for us. Hey man, I don't want 4 of my units all expiring the same month. So if I look and I say, oh, I already have 2 expiring a year from now, I don't want that. You could simply say, let's sign a 14-month or a 16-month. Or there are certain times of year you'd rather not be vacant. It's wintertime, okay? Summer is pretty easy to rent. You might say, I want all my leases to expire in May or June or July. Yes?
What are the easiest months to rent? I mean, they move out which months?
So I cannot answer the question what the easiest month to rent is, because it's too subjective. But I can answer the question, what months do the most people move in? Where is the traffic the highest? Where are my odds the best, okay? And that would be May, June, July, and August. In May, 10% of people that are going to move. In the next 3 months, 15% of people in each month that are going to move. So in those 4 months, 55% of the turnover occurs. So there's going to be more people looking, okay? That doesn't mean it's easier to rent then than it is in December. It just means there's more people looking. And we don't sometimes like December because what if there's only 5 people looking this month for our category, and that's not a big enough volume to make me feel comfortable that one of those 5 people is going to qualify. And so I may prefer the summer because I have higher volume.
I had a great tenant move in between Christmas and New Year's.
There are
And
great
she's
tenants.
A great tenant in the first one, and she qualified in every
So we're not saying that it never works.
Yeah, it's just
we're just
better.
saying there's more volume
Right.
certain months of the year. Okay? All right. Refundable security deposit and non-refundable fee. You might say, renter, you got to put $1,000 down, and $200 is non-refundable. That's a fee. $800 is refundable when you move out. It's your deposit that we can apply to damages, or we can give it all back to you if you leave it nice and don't do damages. Okay, any questions on the rent or fee section? Okay, let's talk about term. And term, there's a lot of things in here that say, that define the above terms. Define what a eviction turnover fee is. Define what a month-to-month fee is. Define what a commencement date means. Define how much notice you have to give them to terminate the lease. And typically, guys, how much notice do you want tenants to give you to move out?
30 days.
Typically 30 days. Okay? If you didn't specify in your contract like this one does, it would be 15. So in some cases, though, you want to give 15 days notice instead of 30. Give me a reason why you might want to do that.
Just the timing.
If I give them notice before their last month's rent, they might be tempted to not pay that last month's rent. And so we might wait till we get the last month's rent and then give them notice. Okay? And if that's in your contract, that's acceptable under Utah law. Okay, yes?
One last question. Why is this better than asking for the first and last month's up?
This is a great question. Why do we ask for a security deposit instead of a first and last month's rent? And it's a matter of semantics and court precedent, what we call case law. Okay? Let's say I take $1,000 deposit, first month's rent, and last month's rent, and 6 months in, I evict them. The damages they owe me is going to be $3,000. And each of those $1,000 deposit, $1,000 first month's rent, $1,000 last month's rent. Now, first month's rent got used, correct? So we still have $2,000 sitting there with $3,000 damages. Not bad, except if I called it last month's rent, what can I not do? I can't apply it yet. And so I have to mail him a check for $1,000 for last month's rent and a bill for $2,000. We'd rather not do that. And so we don't use last month's rent because judges say if you qualify what it's for, you can't use it for other things. Another great example is pet deposit. Now, when people have animals, do we get higher deposits? You bet we do, but we never call it a pet deposit. Why?
Because you'd have to give it back to them.
Because if the pet didn't do damages, you couldn't keep it. But if the kid did, you know, you'd want to say, I have another $500, or they didn't pay rent, I want to take that money. So the reason that we call it all refundable deposit is so that it's unrestricted in our ability to use it. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
So if they decided to get a dog while they're in the middle of their lease,
yes,
you'd want to just increase their deposit instead of asking for a pet deposit, right?
That's a great suggestion. Instead of in the middle of the lease, they come to you and say, hey, I want a dog, and you like them, they're good tenants, you think they're going to be responsible. So you say, great, we're just going to increase your deposit another $500 and allow that dog. Okay? Instead of, let's do a $500 pet deposit, we don't want to restrict those funds. Okay? All right, under security deposit, since we're talking about those anyway, let's read one of my favorite things about this lease. It's the second line there. Resident agrees to promptly reimburse the security deposit within 5 days after notice is given. And resident may not apply any portion of the security deposit to any month's rent. Okay? So, I missed the line in front of it, the important line, sorry. Any sums due or owing by resident to owner may at any time be deducted from said deposit. So if I put $800 deposit and you do an inspection and you found that I did $100 damage, you could immediately fix it. Then you could go to your deposit and take $100 out to pay for the damage. Then you can send me a letter that says, within 5 days you need to fill back up that deposit. Does that make sense? Replenish, if you will, that deposit. This is a great tool that instead of fighting over damages or fighting over utilities or fighting over late fees, we can just say, I took $100 out of your deposit to pay your late fees. Now you've got to pay the deposit back $100. Okay? Any questions? Great strategy, guys. Really like this, and one of the great advantages of being in a good lease like this. Okay, I'm not going to go through every section of this contract, but there is a move-out notice clause that talks about how much notice tenants must give and you must give. There is a subordination clause. There are credit check clauses. And basically what we say is anytime you are past due, we can check your credit. Why might we check someone's credit if they're past due? We want to know where they work. We want to know where their bank accounts are, that kind of stuff to maybe help us collect. Okay, government, things if it gets condemned, what's the liability, that kind of thing. Notices to owner, release of resident, rules and regulations. Most of us have our own separate rules and regulations, just like Wanda said. She says, I don't allow you to work on cars in the garage. That's one of her rules. That's an addendum to her lease. There are general things that we just put right into the lease rules and regulations, like quiet hours are between this time and this time, like you can't cause disturbances in common areas, no alcoholic beverages in common areas, no storing things in common areas, things that are just kind of general, no propane tanks on balconies, fire hazards, things like that. So you want to have just general rules, and then if you have special ones, add an addendum like Wanda has done to her. Okay? Premises condition. This basically says they accept the condition when they move in and they will notify you of any issues within 20 or 48 hours. This doesn't mean if later they say, hey, this has been broken 6 months, you don't have to fix it. It just means you're not liable for going 6 months because they should have told you. Okay? Repairs, this outlines what repairs they're responsible for, that they shouldn't initiate repairs without your permission, that they should, in most cases, give you written notice of requests for maintenance, that they shouldn't let friends or family make modifications without your permission, so on and so forth. Right of entry, this just clarifies when you can enter. Now, remind me what Utah law says if you don't have written in your contract anything about it. How many hours do you have to give notice? 24. But it says, unless modified by rental agreement. So we can modify our agreement to say, listen, I want to be able to enter if suspicion of criminal activity, in emergencies, to show an appraiser. If you've asked me for a repair, and my maintenance guy's standing there and we can't find you, we're going in and fixing it anyway. Okay? So these are the places where you put in your extra flexibility to enter. Contamination. We have an issue where sometimes properties get contaminated. It might be mold, it might be meth, it might be something else. And we just basically say how a tenant should order a test. They should do it through you. They should pay for it in advance. They don't go get a home meth kit. They don't go pay for a test. They order it through you, and you will use a responsible licensed provider to do that testing. Okay. Military clause talks about if somebody's in the military, they get out of their lease, 30 days notice. That's just the law. Okay. Disability, limited liability, general provisions, lots of things like that. But if you turn to the following page, at the bottom of general provisions, this is one that I like, and I think it helps protect you. It says, it's the second to last line, in the event obligations under this agreement or its addendums is assigned to a licensed collection agency or attorney, a collection fee of 40% of the debt obligation assigned shall be added to the amount owed. So if you move out owing me $2,000 and you won't work with me, and I have to hire a collection attorney, we can automatically add $800 to pay his fees. Plus, he can add attorney's fees if he takes you to court. So the judgment might be $4,000 on a $2,000 debt if you don't set up a payment plan or work responsibly with us to communicate about what's going to happen. Okay? Some of the other things I want to point you to is the pests clause. It's interesting how many tenants think it's your job to protect them from mice and from ants and from spiders. And it may be if you've in your lease agreed to, or if your policy is I'm just going to handle it. But in most cases, those things are the resident's responsibility and not the landlord's. And so we clarify that right there. We also say if you bring pests like bed bugs or cockroaches in, it's not the landlord's responsibility. You deem this place pest-free before you move in. And so if there's bed bugs 6 months from now, it's probably you that brought them in. And you're going to be responsible for the cleanup costs. Yes?
We've had a problem with this, and we've had it more than one, and let me tell you what it is. There's these little bugs called earwigs.
Okay.
And they do not come in from the out to the in. What they do is they hitchhike on the cardboard boxes that they get into boxes that people used to move.
Yep.
And they bring the boxes into the house, and these little earwigs leave the boxes. They're not indoor. They never come indoor.
Right.
So I took your thing on the giving them the spray.
Yeah.
And so forth. That's something that they bring in, just so that people are aware of this about these earwigs. It's very
Yeah. He's sharing that it's very common for earwigs to hitchhike on boxes or box elder bugs or spiders or things like that, and the tenant panics. And he says he just hands them a can of Raid or a mouse trap and says, here, it's your responsibility. Now, guys, don't be ridiculous. If they're not taking care of it, you need to take care of it before it gets out of control, before it becomes an expensive infestation. So monitor it and follow up. And this is why we do quarterly inspections. Okay? Because if you're seeing signs of rodents or cockroaches and the tenant's not taking care of it, you need to hold them responsible or it could get worse. All right. I want to remind you that property built before 1978, you must accompany your lease with what addendum? The lead paint addendum. The lead paint addendum basically says property built before 78 may or may not have lead paint here. If you know, you have to disclose what you know. If you don't, you just say, I don't know anything. But if you ever see cracking, peeling paint, the tenant agrees to notify you so that you can encapsulate it. What does that mean? Cover it up. Okay? Lead paint's dangerous. People eat it. Okay? But if they don't eat it, it's not dangerous. Okay? Or breathe in the dust or things like that. So the best way to really deal with it is encapsulate it, which is cover it over it. Okay? Sometimes you have to get it out of there, but most times we encapsulate. Okay, we have every renter sign and every renter put a social security number. You should sign and put a contact place. Now, it's really interesting how many renters lose their rental agreement. Okay? So keep yours because they're going to ask for it. Okay? Yes?
Now, if they call you and ask for it, you have to give them a copy of that?
I can think of no legitimate reason why you wouldn't give a tenant a copy if they request it. Okay? I think it's always legitimate to give your business partner a reminder of what your terms are. Okay? All right. In most leases nowadays, landlords have the option to require renter's insurance. Give me an argument for why you should require renter's insurance right on your lease.
If there's a damage, it should go against them, not against us.
If they start a fire with their capital, we don't want our insurance picking it up. We want their insurance picking it up. if their washing machine has a rubber gasket that breaks or a hose that breaks, we want their insurance paying for it, not our insurance for it. The other reason is sometimes things happen. For instance, a landlord in Provo called recently. He said his 18-unit building, 6 of which were below subgrade, the water line, the city's water line, the street flooded and flooded all of his, broke and flooded all his units. And every single one of his tenants called him mad. And what do you think they said? Who's going to pay for my TV? Who's going to pay for my stuff? And he had to kind of have the awkward conversation. Well, not me. Okay? What he should have done is said, oh, remember when you moved in, I required that you get renter's insurance. Only about $8-10 a month. If he'd have required that when they moved in, he wouldn't be the villain, he'd be the hero. They'd say, oh, thank you so much. Think of what devastation my life would be if my landlord hadn't made me get renter's insurance. So there's 2 very good reasons. And let me remind you what you want to be listed as on their insurance. You want to be an additional insured. Why?
Because they'll contact you when it runs out.
Because Geico or Allstate or whoever, if they're about to cancel the policy, they'll look and they'll say, is there any additional insured? And if there is, they'll send you a letter and say, did you know this person's is about to be canceled? And you can serve them a what? 3-day notice, say fix this. Okay? To make sure that they maintain that coverage. Okay, turn to the next page. This is a reasonable accommodation request form. I'm not going to cover this tonight, but I'm going to tell you that we have revamped our assistive animal and accommodation request forms. We are going to present on those next month. I'm really excited about what's happened. We actually got sued. I'm not excited that we got sued, but life happens. And HUD basically came back and said, make some changes to these forms, and we will accept them. You know what that is to me? A get out of jail free card. So we now have agreements in writing from HUD that if we follow the instructions that we will teach you next month, and if we use the forms exactly the way that HUD has kind of said, yeah, these are fine, then we will be okay, and we will be, basically immune from complaints of discrimination if we're following this process. Okay? Really exciting because the #1 fair housing complaint in Utah is, I asked for an assistive animal, a service animal, a comfort animal. My landlord tried to charge me a deposit, which we never do. What we should do is verify if they what?
They are
disabled, and if the animal is required, is prescribed for them. And if it is, if they are, and it is, guess what? We let them have it. We don't charge any additional. We just say, great, that's a tool to help someone with a disability adapt. It's like crutches or a wheelchair. It's a seeing eye dog or a comfort animal or somebody's depression is moderated by their cat. Okay? So, is there a lot of abuse? Tons.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so concerned is that the minute somebody hears it's a $400 pet deposit, what does Fluffy become? Oh, never mind, Fluffy's a service animal. And that's not fair to who? The legitimately disabled who really need that, and the landlord. If it's not really required, we shouldn't be giving it for free. We shouldn't be allowing it, especially in a building where we don't normally allow it. So we need to have a fair process that verifies that people are legitimately disabled and need that accommodation, and then we allow it for them and weed out everybody else. Yes?
Well, how would you justify? I mean, do you need something from their doctor? Or
What's the process?
What's the process?
So the process is, and there's forms in here, I'm not going to get into it tonight because it's the topic of our meeting next week, but the form basically says you've got to fill out an animal request form, and you've got to fill out a medical release basically that says, this is the doctor you can call and ask if I'm disabled, and who will tell you that, yes, I do need this animal. Okay?
It
So
could be any animal.
we don't take a note from a doctor that says, take 2 cats and call me in the morning. What we do is we verify that they are legitimately disabled and they legitimately need the accommodation or the animal, and then we move forward. That's how we protect the good people and weed out the abusers. Okay?
Why?
Okay, next form on page 14 is the move-in, move-out form. It's kind of a form where we say this is the condition at move-in, this is the condition at move-out, and if there's any differences, we know who to bill, don't we? Okay? We know that it was the tenant who caused it. The next thing is the notice of declaration of abandonment.
Who fills this out? The move-in condition?
Oh, great question. Who fills out the move-in, move-out checklist? You tell me in your business who does it.
I do.
You do it. Anybody else let the tenant? I let the tenant. Okay? And the reason that I let the tenant is because if I do it, he's going to say, well, he missed a bunch of stuff. But if he does it, if he missed stuff, it's not my problem. And so now we may renegotiate. Okay? So if we start, I really recommend you do it together.
Yeah.
And you write it together, or maybe I'm the one that's writing it and you say, let's look around, and he says, I want you to add this, and you say, sure. Okay? Because I just don't see any reason why we shouldn't allow tenants to add everything they want, as ticky-tack as it is. If they say there's one tiny, tiny, tiny little stain in the carpet underneath where the couch is going to go, well, it ought to be on there so we remember when they move out that that was fine and it was acceptable to everybody. Or if they say the casing on the front door has a couple of places where previous tenants or somebody, nicked it, fine, okay? I don't want to accidentally charge them for nicking it on the way out. So I think it's fine to let them fill it out, but best practice would be I do it in my handwriting with their support. Okay? Notice the declaration of abandonment. This is a form that you serve if the place is abandoned. Okay? And there's two types of abandonment. One is, if they've moved all their stuff out and rent's past due, it's pretty obvious they've abandoned. Okay, in that case, you don't even need to serve this form. You just change the locks and go on with your life. But in the case where there's still some items remaining in the apartment, the law says if 15 days have elapsed since rent was due, so they're 15 days behind, and there's no reasonable evidence they're there. Give me an example of no reasonable evidence. Papers piling up, mail's piling up, the milk in the refrigerator when you inspect it is rotten, nobody's seen them.
Utilities get turned off.
Utilities are off. So in that case, we'd serve a notice like this that says, hey, in 24 hours we're going to come in and change the lock, so we're declaring it abandoned and giving you 24 hours to fix it, to call us if it's not abandoned.
Now, where do you put this? On the door?
Post it on the door just like a 3-day notice.
What if they've already left it and they're never going to see that?
We do it to protect ourselves and take a picture. Okay? So it's best practice just to protect ourselves.
Well, we had a situation one time where someone lived in an apartment and the person was arrested and taken away.
Okay?
There was an argument.
Okay?
The police came, and the only person that had an outstanding warrant was the lady that filed the complaint. They took her away, but there were people still that were living with her in the apartment. Mm-hmm. Now, if she was going to be there for quite a while, evidently. Now, is that abandoned because the other people weren't on the lease and we didn't know about it?
It's not an abandoned premises if unauthorized occupants are staying there. That is a lease violation. Okay? She moved people in without your permission, and so we serve a notice that says, hey, within 3 days, get rid of these people. And is it easy to serve people in jail? Yeah, we know right where they are. Okay? And so you serve that notice to her in jail. She has 3 days to fix it. And if she doesn't fix it, we evict everybody in her name, and she's the one that has the liability. Okay? But the judge will order the place, returned to you, and everybody will have to leave. Okay? All right, next form is the rental criteria. We had a scenario earlier where we said sometimes you let tenants find you a replacement tenant. This is what guides them. Say, look for somebody who has this kind of income. Look for somebody who doesn't have criminal history, who has this kind of work history, who has good rental history, so on and so forth, who has decent credit. Okay? And then, we don't just trust them, we still do a background check. But this is a great thing. How many of you use one of these? Okay? A lot of hands are going up. And have you learned that sometimes when you hand this to somebody, they say, you know what? On second thought, I don't like the paint. I'm going to go somewhere else. What did they really just tell you? You didn't meet your criteria, so they're not going to waste your time. Hallelujah. Okay? What a great tool to screen out people who would be wasting our time. Okay? Also, it's a great tool to protect ourselves from discrimination. If somebody says, you hate purple people because you won't rent to me. You say, I don't hate purple people, but I have criteria, and I actually gave this to you in advance. You read over it and you said you qualify. The reason I denied you isn't because you're purple. it's because of something on here that I told you in advance was important to me. Okay? When you use these in a fair housing allegation, it is one of the best tools that you can have to prove, no, it wasn't because of their ethnicity or their gender, it was because of they didn't qualify. Now let's remind ourselves, on May 12th, the state of Utah has 2 new protected classes that we can't discriminate against. What are they? She used the word gay, anyone who's gay. So we call it sometimes LGBT. Okay? Also, the technical term is sexual orientation and gender identity. But don't treat gay people any differently. Most of us don't already. Okay? You know, we're looking for good customers. We don't care if they're BYU fans or Utah fans. We don't care if they're gay or they're straight. We're looking for people that will take good care of the apartment and pay rent and not commit crime. Okay? So I don't think many landlords have a problem with this, but there is now a mechanism that people can complain and a fair housing investigation begins. So protect yourself. So if somebody gets denied and says, you denied me because I was gay, it would sure be nice to have a rental criteria that said, I told you it was credit score. Okay? I don't care that you're gay, it's credit score. Okay? All right. Next page in this packet is a criminal background check and a credit report. I'm not going to get into those tonight. We have a whole scenario where we go through those, a whole seminar. But one form that I do want to tell you about, and I notice it's not on all of these, it's on probably some of them, but there's a new form called the 5-day deposit return form. Okay? Basically, the law changed that if you don't get a deposit back within 30 days, there's no penalty until a tenant gives you another notice that says, here's my correct address. I don't know what happened, landlord, but here's my right address. I expect this within 5 days. If you don't get it back to them then, there's a higher penalty. It used to be a $100 statutory penalty. Now it's 100% of the deposit. But the good news is, it doesn't kick in until when? Until you get a second chance to fix it. We call it an opportunity cure. We love this. We think it'll cut down litigation on deposit disputes considerably. We think it's fair to the renter to say, listen, if that landlord's really being a dirtbag and not getting it back, jack that penalty up. That penalty should be higher. Okay? It should be 100% of the deposit, plus a $100 statutory penalty, plus attorney's fees and court costs to the prevailing party. But if they sue you on a deposit issue and you win, the prevailing party, meaning you, gets attorney's fees and court costs. So we think it's fair, it protects everybody, and gives you an opportunity to fix it. Okay, any questions?
So if you run over the 35 days on the repairs that you feel are necessary, you're able to...
This is a really great question. I'm not done with the apartment at 30 days, Paul.
Okay.
What should I do? Well, the law says send them an estimate. Okay?
Of the repairs.
Say, this is what it is so far, and this is what I'm guessing it's going to be. Send them an estimate and say, when I know for sure, I'll get back to you. Okay? But judges are very unsympathetic to the issue that you've had 30 days and you couldn't work it out. Nah, that's long enough. Okay? Many states it's 15 days. Okay? And so 30 days is reasonable, and we just need to estimate if we're not sure. Okay, a couple things I want to just talk to you that happened in the legislature in addition to the protected class. We had a bill that changes the rules for rentals and HOAs. Does anybody in here have HOA rentals? Okay, so here's what's happening we've noticed the last few years in HOAs. Sometimes HOAs, or not the HOA itself, but some of the people that live there don't like renters and don't like landlords. So they've been passing rules that are discriminatory against landlords. Of course, landlords are a protected class and neither are renters per se. But we have passed 4 protections in the last 2 years to limit what they can do to discriminate against you. So we have said last year, they cannot require that they pre-approve your applicant. Okay? So they can't say, before you sign a lease, come get our permission. No. You're dealing with fair housing, you're the one liable, you've got to make the decision, not them. They can ask for a copy of the lease, but they can't ask to approve it in advance. Now, the second thing they can't ask for is copies of credit reports or applications. Why? What's on there? Sensitive information that they have no right to. So don't give that information to them. They can't ask. So we solved those 2 issues last year. This year we solved an additional issue. It was a little more complicated. We couldn't do it the first year. But we also noticed many HOAs or community associations or condo associations, if you will, say we're charging landlords and tenants more money. We're charging $50 extra a month in HOA fees for those guys. Or we're charging $500 every time somebody moves out. And we just clarified that no, you can't charge different fees to landlords and renters than you charge to everybody else. If every time somebody moves out, you charge a $500 fee, so when the people go on a mission and somebody moves in, watch their place for a year, you charge that a $500 fee. Or their daughter moves home from college from the summer, you charge them a $500 fee. If they charge it for everybody, they can charge it for your renters. But we think they don't charge it for everybody. That fee will go away. Okay? The last thing is they can't have different rules for renters. In many HOAs, unfortunately, they say renters are second-class citizens, and while owners can have dogs, renters can't. Well, you can have restrictions on animals as long as they're equal. But you can't say renters are second-class citizens and they can't have pets, but owners can. They can't say renters can't use the clubhouse or the swimming pool or the amenities. If they let everybody else use them, they have to let the renter. They can say the owner gives up his right to use them if he has a renter, or we have an additional fee for the owner, because that's not fair that now there's twice as much use. That's reasonable to charge a fee, but they can't just deny the renter access. Okay, any questions? Yes.
On that cruise, since
Yes.
the lawyer's going to be on it, can we write that off?
You will have to ask your accountant what you can write off on a cruise, but I believe most people write off a considerable portion of their landlord legal cruise as a business expense. But I can't give legal advice or tax advice. You're going to have to consult your professional. But what a great thing to do. Go on a business trip, and you're going to have a lot of training, guys. And not just the 12 hours of training. Who are you going to sit with at dinner? Each other, other landlords. You're going to talk shop. You're going to sell properties back and forth. You're going to become best friends with them. It's a really valuable. I strongly encourage you to go. It's a great thing.
Where's the cruise to?
Oh, it's out of Port Canaveral, Florida, and it goes to St. Thomas, it goes to the Bahamas, and I think it goes to St. Martin. And it's on a very nice Royal Caribbean ship, one of the bigger ones, not the very biggest, but one of the middle-sized, very nice. So if you've never been on a cruise, by all means, experiment with a group that you're comfortable with, and it'd be a great opportunity for you. And it's the week after Thanksgiving.
You get a group discount?
Yes, we have a group discount. There's information on it on that flyer. If you have questions, call me personally. There's also a tour guide, travel agent on there that you can email him, and he'll help you as well. Okay? There'll be about at least 50 people from Utah, 50 cabins. We already sold 40 the last time we looked from Utah. Some of those are realtors, some of them are landlords, but there'll be a lot of people from Utah there that you can network with, and I think you'll learn some great things. Well, thank you so much for coming and being a member of the Apartment Association. We'll see you next time.